Well, some people have been going crazy about the fact that the iPad Pro is getting some pro apps. Luckily, you've got me to take a more realistic approach here and break this update down so we don't get fooled by Apple again. It's not all doom and gloom though, there are some positives here depending on how you use your iPad. We're also going to talk about what this update means for the iPad Pro itself in general, who Apple seem to be targeting this at, and whether or not you should care. I mean, not everyone is a music producer or a content creator, right?
Speak for yourself, mate.
Okay, fair enough. I'm Alex and I do down-to-earth tech videos. They've done that. Yes, Apple have done it. They announced a major software update to the iPad Pro, bringing Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro to the iPad. Interestingly though, they did that about 3 weeks before the yearly developer event, WWDC, where they normally announced, you guessed it, software updates. So this is raising a lot of questions which we'll discuss in this video, but before we get into that, let's focus on what this means for the iPad Pro. By the way, I don't want this to be a rant and I'll try to provide my usual balanced view here. On the surface, Apple has done what many people, including myself, have been asking for a long time, well, many years in my case. I've done countless videos here complaining about the iPad Pro specifically and the fact that they are giving us all this power, new M chip, right, for the last M1, M2, lots of memory, and what the heck for, right? So in a way, they've listened, right? We now finally have access to pro apps on the iPad, and I, for one, hope that this is just the beginning. What this means for the iPad Pro is that it's finally making more sense for some creators to rely on this tablet for more advanced work. I wouldn't go as far as saying professionals though, because it's a little bit early still, and from what I can tell right now, it does look a little bit basic. Especially the Final Cut Pro. And don't fret, I will discuss what this means for you if you're not a content creator as well, right? But before we get into that, let's talk about the details of the update. And there are two major gotchas here. Well, let's call it a word of caution. Well, two of them. The first detail is kind of an elephant in the room. Yes, I used that term, so I could use that picture again. Ivan, that's for you, mate. Why is there an elephant in the room? I think this is the first move from Apple towards turning Final Cut Pro in general on the Mac as well into a subscription model. I came from Premiere Pro before and I actually enjoy the fact that Final Cut Pro on the Mac is a one-off cost. To a lot of people, that is the reason they stick with Final Cut instead of Adobe Premiere Pro, for example. But on the other hand, Final Cut Pro for the iPad is only $4.99 per month or $49 a year, which to be fair is quite reasonable, especially if you're making money from your content, right? So right now, it's not a problem. But I'd be careful though and maybe wait until after WWDC in June before fully committing to Final Cut Pro in general. Personally, I don't like the sound of it because I'm pretty sure the Final Cut Pro on the Mac would not just be $4.99, right? So DaVinci Resolve, maybe that's my next move. The second word of caution is storage. Apple will not allow you to use an external drive for the footage, which tells me that they're kind of expecting you to use the iPad or the iPhone as the cameras, right? And use the iPad storage itself for storing the videos. Now, I don't know many creators out there who would be able to work just with this setup in the long run. So it's a strange move from Apple, I think, especially knowing that there are other options out there that do allow you to use external drives. Sure, you can sort of move files from the camera to the iPad, but this video here, for example, that I'm recording right now, it took about 120 gigs of storage. If I only use the iPad and assuming I try 4K videos, we're talking about 1 gig for every 2 minutes of video recording with the iPad, which is not a lot, but when you record hundreds of clips, right? This could become not only a storage nightmare, but a file management nightmare. Whether you're recording with the iPad or with a camera, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, have you tried copying, moving files, deleting files on the iPad? Without a third-party app, it's virtually impossible to do it. Anyway, that's not the video, but the point is, I don't mess around with the quality of video when it comes to YouTube for you, So I'm recording 10-bit 422, which is the highest possible in my setup here. By the time I add some more footage on top, like some B-roll footage like the one you're watching right now, yeah, some of my videos can go up to half a terabyte, if not more. So not being able to use external storage for me is a bummer, almost like a non-starter. Especially when we know that other software like LumaFusion is able to support that, I think.
Yep, it does. Check this out. Go into preferences and you can see here.
Naturally, the cynic in me kicks in at this point and I think Apple just wants you to buy a big boy iPad Pro with lots of storage. With a new iPad Pro looming, with a bigger 14-inch display, this is starting to make sense from an Apple sales perspective. So who is this update for? Honestly, this can be a really exciting update for creators who are just starting out. This is me trying to be balanced here and trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who never used Final Cut Pro. I can totally imagine that if you have an iPad Pro and you're not really doing much with it right now and you want to start using it for content creation, Final Cut Pro could give the iPad some new life, right? This could get you into content creation for an extra $5 a month, and I think that's great, I honestly do. Sure, there are more limitations which I'll highlight shortly, but I can't ignore these positives. And for the right sort of content creator, who are seeing this as an additional tool to their arsenal as well, this could be great. For example, live drawing, right? It seems to be something that I'd love to use. I am showing you here some rough examples of how I can see myself using it. The thing with content creation for me is about being able to be ourselves, being unique, right? So being able to draw on the video and animate it feels like a great way to, again, bring out what is unique about ourselves. The Apple Pencil gestures and features will definitely come to life here as well, but even without the pencil, it looks very intuitive, very Apple, you could even say, right? But let me level with you. This is where the positives kind of end. If you've used Final Cut Pro for a long time, or even like 1-2 years like I have, you are gonna hate this app on the iPad the first time you use it. I tried to look past it, I tried to remain balanced when I was using the app and sort of try not to criticize it too much. And I did really give it a good go. I even went back and reordered the same iPad that I had returned a few months ago to really give Apple the benefit of the doubt on the M2 chip, but I personally just couldn't get on with it. Let me explain what I think is going on. I think this is because our brain is expecting the Final Cut Pro that we know and love on the Mac, and you can see some resemblance when you start using it, but you quickly realize that there are many things that are just not there, or are just not as easy to use, or is a very cut down version of it. There's also some bugs, or at least I hope there are bugs, that are making this quite difficult to use. To give you a few examples, right? When it comes to applying effects, something you do after you cut your video for the first time, right? You cut your main footage, you go over it again and apply some sound and visual effects, to keep that video nice and engaging. One of the things I noticed straight away is that it doesn't matter what effect you're trying to apply, the frame sort of gets skipped forward or to the beginning of the footage. So you're only seeing the effect on a reference frame that may not be the frame that you wanted. In Final Cut Pro for the Mac, you apply the effect, or you can preview the effect across the entire clip. For a lot of cases where the footage looks similar throughout, this won't matter. If it's just a static shot of me talking, for example, it doesn't matter what frame I'm choosing, right? But if you have dozens of clips and you're trying to keep those clips looking consistent, this is going to be a big problem. The next one is a massive one for me. Keyboard shortcuts. At least I couldn't find a way of making them work. I looked, the settings were just not there. As a video editor, that's a major issue for me, right? You learn how to be quick on video editing by learning the shortcuts. Yes, you can use some boards, and they've added this wheel, which is kind of okay, but I need my cuts. I need to be able to use the keyboard to do the cuts. So I don't understand why they removed that, just why? The other one is more to do with iPad OS, which is split view, is not supported. When I'm editing, I find it really useful to have another window open. It could be my script, it could be a browser window. Not all the time, but it could be useful, right? When you're reviewing the video to have a reference of the text or something that you want to check. I thought maybe it's okay, I'll just go into the settings and customize it. And again, you go into the settings and there's nothing there. I could end the video here, to be honest, but I thought, let me persevere, right? Let me put myself into the shoes of someone who never used Final Cut Pro and try again. Let's try this again. So I went in again and tried to use the features that Apple are claiming to be kind of the showcase for this app. One of them is the scene removal mask, so no need for a green screen. This sounds great. So they have this new scene removal mask, which sounds awesome, right? From the ads that you see and from what they show. And again, whether you are just starting out or not, you might have limited space to record. Well, it wasn't perfect, but I did manage to get myself my background removed, and I put some cool background in the footage. So really 2 layers of footage and a bit of color correction, so nothing that intensive. But when you play it back though, it feels like I'm editing on a Pentium 3 machine. Remember those days? It's just not good enough for me. I'm pretty sure if I used simple footage like 4K recorded from the iPad or recorded from a mobile device, you'd probably be okay, or even from the camera but without any LUTs applied or anything like that, it might be okay. But as someone who edits video pretty much every single day, this is not for me. It's just too limited. But something just occurred to me as I was editing this video. Do let me know if you'd like to see a video where I share the optimal settings for video, because I appreciate that you may not care about the 4K 10-bit 422 settings, but you might be okay with a 1080p video or even 4K but with a friendlier format. Will I ever use it? I'm not sure right now, to be honest. There are some big deal breakers here. As you can see, I did give this a real go, and there's a couple more limitations that you should be aware of. The first one is transferring things between the Mac and the iPad. For example, you can't start a project on the Mac and finish it on the iPad. That is a major no-no for me, right? This could change in future, but out of the gates, it's just not possible. I would have loved to be able to export my project from the Mac, or even if it was just a section of the edit, right? I wouldn't even mind that. And then maybe later on, go to a cafe or whatever and, edit that section on the iPad, with the pencil, add some hand drawing animations and things like that. That would have been awesome, right? And I'm thinking, if I can come up with these ideas, why can't Apple? I think we know why, but anyway, another situation might be you're in the office and you want to go home, right? So you export the project to an external hard drive and you edit it on the iPad later from the couch whilst eating a pina colada or something. I meant sipping. Weird reference, but anyway. As I said on the storage section, that is another blow that makes this pretty useless for me. You can come here for this bit if you want. Just saw your hair up. Let me see. After I say the dog, you just come in and wave. Okay? All right. There's another major gotcha, but before I forget, this YouTube business is extremely hard. It's bank holiday here in the UK today. I came here to record this. My dog is desperate to go for a walk. My son is over here trying to be quiet, not make any noises. And I've got meetings and stuff as well to deal with because I've got another job. YouTube is not my main business. So getting this channel discovered is the hardest part of this. But you can really help me very easily by just giving this video a thumbs up, commenting on it. I still try to respond to every single comment, or sharing this video with someone. All of that really helps. And after this video, take a look around if it's your first time here, and if you like my stuff, it would be awesome if you subscribed. I'm here at least once a week with a new down-to-earth tech video for you. Not just Apple either, any tech in general. I love talking about my gadgets. Right, back to the video. There's no plugins, so this is the other major gotcha that I mentioned. The good news is that they say it's coming soon. But for me, it's a little bit risky to rely on that because I don't know what they mean by soon. And also, I don't know if the companies and the people I bought, plugins from are going to be the ones that they support. If you read the fine print, it does say that they will support motion VFX, which for me is awesome because it's one of them that I use. All of the effects that you see in this video today are motion VFX. So I am hopeful because they are awesome. And I have a discount code, by the way, so if you check in the description. But we've been here before, right, with Apple. I don't know if they will support all of them, or even if we need to update the plugins or pay extra for them. There are just too many unknowns. Some of these are really expensive as well. So, I wouldn't assume that this coming soon means it will come at no additional cost. So I'll probably just hold on until after WWDC to see if there's any news coming out of that. If you can wait, if you see benefits in getting it now, then by all means, you can always cancel the subscription as well, right? And by the way, as you can imagine, I'm a heavy user of video editing software, and Final Cut is what I actually use on a daily basis. So naturally, I did focus on that and won't really talk about Logic Pro here. I only use Logic Pro a few times in my whole life, and I don't consider myself a heavy user of it at all. But a lot of the points I raise here will apply to both Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro. But the good news for Logic Pro users is that you can move back and forth between the Mac and the iPad, and there's plenty more settings and features in the Logic Pro that may make more sense for you. You can also export your Logic music tracks to Final Cut on the iPad, so that could be something useful for your workflow. So for Logic on the iPad, I think that's amazing. And if that workflow between Logic and Final Cut on the iPad is something that you see yourself doing, this could be a massive time saver for you. Now you might be asking, do I need the latest iPad Pro? And I know this is probably not what you wanted to hear, right? In general, what I shared today, but it's been my experience. I can't sugarcoat it. It's pretty terrible when it comes to Final Cut Pro. If none of these issues that I raise here apply to you or your workflow, and you're starting out with very simple footage, then the next question is, do I need the latest iPad Pro for this? I did share my thoughts on the M2 versus M1 iPad Pros in general on this video over here, but hear me out. And here's where my previous experience with Apple, and more specifically Apple marketing, has taught me a few things. If Final Cut Pro or Logic Pro is something that you really want on the iPad, your first reaction might be, oh gosh, I need to spend all this money on the M2 iPad Pro, completely max it out, so I can use this latest software. Bear with me, I will get to the point. This is not TikTok. Realistically, I would say wait a few weeks if you can, watch a few reviews. I will be doing some comparisons myself here on the channel, but don't jump too soon on the latest iPad Pro just because Apple marketing tells you to. I've tested this on the M1 and the M2 iPad Pros here, and I can tell you, without all the fluffiness that you might get on some of these other channels, right? Oh, it's so pretty, look, it's pink. Do me a favor. Right, Apple at the masters are making you feel like the device that you just bought like a year or two ago is already outdated. They are absolutely the kings of doing that. In my comparison between the M2 and the M1 iPad Pro, there really wasn't much between them. And the same was true for Final Cut Pro. And I really wasn't gonna bother with this, but then I thought that's lazy content, right? So let's try and render the same video on the M1 iPad Pro and the M2 iPad Pro and see how they perform. That difference in time in rendering for me doesn't really matter too much because I personally use that time to go create my thumbnail and get ready for the video to upload. If that's something that you care about, then the M2 iPad Pro is the better choice for you. Is that gonna be much of a big deal for you? You let me know in the comments. But there is another great reason on why you should not jump too soon in buying the latest iPad. Apple could be planning for a new iPad Pro this year with a bigger screen and hopefully with a few updates that make the iPad OS software better and really more pro, where using Final Cut and Logic could make even more sense. Like, a 14-inch tablet that can allow you to multitask. Who knows? Well, that's a story for another video anyway. See you soon.